There's a video on Twitter of a young girl and a trans person dancing. Have you seen this video? Dancing around them. Maybe, perhaps I shouldn't ask this question if you haven't seen the video.
Go
but,
on. No.
Basically, the question is that this trans person is making a sexual dance around this young, I would say, toddler girl at this party, and it's gone viral on Twitter because a lot of people are saying, well, why did no one intervene? Why was this allowed to happen? Why has this suddenly become acceptable? And my question to you is, why? Because surely 10 years ago, 20 years ago, adults at that party perhaps would have thought this isn't necessarily the best thing in the world for a young child to experience.
Could I answer that by going to this is quite a deep level of our species. We are deeply herd animals to such an extent that we pick off people who are outside of the herd. We target them. What happens on social media, which we talk about as if it's a new phenomenon, is one of the oldest phenomena of our species, one of the most deeply ingrained phenomena. We pretend that we like dissidence, and we don't. Every society crushes it, if they can, for as long as they can. Every group does it. Look at the Catholic Church. Look at the Catholic Church. There were so many people who permitted what we agreed was one of the worst things that anyone could do, which was to harm a child. And good people thought it was more important to cover that up and even risk letting it go on than to allow a PR blow to occur against the Catholic Church. Were they bad people, the people who did this? No, they're the same people as everybody else. They were protecting what they regarded as sacred. Sacred values exist always. The interesting question is, how do you identify what they are in your own time? And do you allow people to run in any way against them? Now, 50 years ago, the church might have been regarded as one of the institutions so important to protect that you would allow morally reprehensible things to be done and to be covered up in order to protect the institution. We might say, I don't want to take a low blow against a media competitor of yours, but we might say that the same thing existed in the BBC light entertainment division for quite a long time. I don't doubt, by the way, that the same thing has happened in some degree in different areas, in every media organization in the world, as in every other effectively closed group. We protect ourselves in this way. Now, it happens that one of the sacred values of our own age, alongside anti-homophobia, anti-racism, anti-sexism, anti-misogyny, and so on, has become trans, where trans people have, slightly like gay people, become this magical fairy pixie dust people who the gods have graciously granted us. By the way, which has a long lineage in world history. I mean, I say world history because every country has versions of it, so it's obviously quite deeply ingrained in us, this. But it's a particular thing in our own era, and there are various views about why that is. Camille Paglia says that it's something that happens at the end of civilizations, that we become particularly interested in crossing across sexes. Why the late Roman antiquity was particularly interested in hermaphroditism, and so on. There are lots of interesting explanations why it might be the case. But at the moment, trans is one of the sacred values of our time. So if you see something in a social context which even goes against a very deep feeling of your own morality, protect the children, perhaps the deepest instinct we could have, certainly the most important one to have, and one of the new sacred values is dancing around it, a lot of people will allow the current sacred value to override their deep moral instinct. And then years later, when all stands in a different light, they will feel shame about that. As somebody who doesn't have a particular, or has a slightly unusual, like a lot of people do, I don't have no herd instinct. Of course I have, some will do. But as somebody who has a slightly lower herd instinct on a lot of things, my own opinion's enough for me. I don't care if I'm the only one who holds it. I recognize that for the time being, I can see which are the things that we are making into our gods. And I can see the ones that I know we are going to be embarrassed by in our own lifetimes. And I think that the self-appointed task of people like me then in an era like this is to identify those and try to get people off them as early as we can. So let's have a reasonable discussion about the reasonable things that might be existing in trans, and let's do that before we do mastectomies on the young.
I want to delve into yourself in a minute, talking about, as you just mentioned there, your kind of fire, your kind of purpose on this earth, why you spend so much time and energy and passion talking about the issues that you do. But before we do that, I want to ask if you could answer very briefly, and then we'll talk about some perhaps more happy topics to end the interview on, because I like to end the interview on a more happy and optimistic note. I'm a bit of a naive optimist. Is our society at the end of days? Are we facing that catastrophe that Rome had, for example?
There is no short answer to that. There are different views on this, and I'm not sure entirely which one I subscribe to. The normal point to make is that the Roman Empire, it's 4 centuries between the reign of Nero and the collapse of the empire. And when people say this can't go on, you have to be very careful about what this is and what can't is doing in that sentence. Things can go on an awful long time, in an allegedly unsustainable manner. I think there is also an inbuilt problem. You said a short answer, but it's impossible to answer a point on civilization.
As brief as possible.
Too brief. I think there's also the problem of what a friend of mine in the tech world describes as the risk of self-fulfilling prophecy on these sorts of things. Say that our civilization is exhausted and tired, and you might make it so. Look, there's a new book about this that I've just been reviewing that diagnoses this society as being sort of decadent, and of course the misunderstanding about decadence is that it's, there's lots of problems about the word now, but there is a perception that decadence immediately leads to collapse and therefore to change and renewal, which is not entirely true historically. We tend to think of fin de siècle Paris or Weimar Germany, but actually decadence is something that can be sustained for an awfully long time. I'm not making a moral judgment when I say decadence, by the way. I'm saying that things like the very bad signs in our own society of having, for instance, the biggest, most powerful and richest entertainment complex that the world has ever seen, pumping out film after unwatchable film in which characters invented for cartoon books 2 or 3 generations ago now are endlessly cycled around in hybrid formats, battling each other or with each other against another foe invented a couple of generations ago. The point being, a society that makes bad films may not be decadent, but one that just keeps repeating the same material almost certainly is. So I can see and when I'm given the opportunity, can speak about the chances of renewal, and I can see exactly what they are. And I can also see the cycle of endless repetition and lack of creativity and lack of purpose and lack of drive, which I fear is one of the distinguishing factors of our age. But then you could say that it is in each age until something new is born.